Welcome back. Before we resume the world this week, a sample of the stories that Tom Burgess-Watson will be following for you at the top of the hour. In its first ruling on the burkini, France's highest administrative court overturns the ban in a Riviera seaside town. As Italy's prime minister declares a state of emergency, the hope of finding new survivors from Wednesday's quake fades. Miners in Bolivia dismantle roadblocks as President Morales denounces the deadly beating of the deputy interior minister by picketers. And Apple issues a global iPhone security update after the uncovering of powerful espionage software targeting an Emirati activist's telephone. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week, and it's in partnership with The Daily Beast. We say hello to Christopher Dickey. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Anne Bagameri of the International New York Times, Leo Jacinto of France24.com, and from the Africa Report, Patrick Smith. Now, the week saw what some had been waiting for years, Turkish tanks to go into Syria. They did so to chase ISIS from a border town and also warn Syrian Kurdish militias to back off across the Euphrates River after recent gains against ISIS. Fears in Ankara that the Kurdish militias could have an unbroken band of territory stretching from Syria all the way into Iraq. The operation launched hours before the U.S. Vice President Joe Biden landed in Ankara. What was your reaction, Christopher Dickey, before Biden's even landed when we hear about those Turkish tanks rolling in?
Well, it was about time the Turks did something more militant than opened their borders to ISIS, which they did for a long time. And I think it was good news in terms of taking Jarablus, but it's clear that their motives, just as you laid out right now, their motive is at least as much to stop the Kurds from consolidating their position as it is to fight against the so-called Islamic State. So it's one of those terribly complicated situations, made more complicated by the fact that those Kurds, the YPG as we call them, are supported by the United States. They are the best fighting allies on the ground that the United States has. So when they have been taking cities, as they have been doing recently, they've been taking it with American air support, a lot of times with American weaponry, sometimes with American soldiers embedded in their ranks. Now we have the Turks coming in and saying they're going to fight the Islamic State, but they're also going to try and intimidate these people who have American soldiers embedded in their ranks. So it's a pretty messy situation.
And we heard the U.S. Vice President tell the Kurds, the Syrian Kurds, to move back as well behind the Euphrates River.
Yeah, there's a picture in the dictionary under complicated of the map of Turkey and its alliances with the United States. I mean, it's an amazingly complicated hairball. It's there's just no other way to put it. Joe Biden comes along and he's, in order to show solidarity with our Turkish allies, and I say our as an American. America needs Turkey. It needs Incirlik Air Base. It needs Turkish help in combating ISIS. It knows that Turkey is fighting essentially a two-front war against ISIS and against the Kurds. The Americans are partnered with the Kurds. At some point, they have to try to push different levers at different times. Saying that the Kurds needed to move back, at least one of the commentators, especially from the New York Times, said this is probably a move to try to put pressure on the Turks to actually solve their own Kurdish problem so that nobody else really has to. When you look at it from the outside, it is impossible to know at any given moment who's friends with whom and who's pressuring whom. But I think what you saw with Biden saying this is everything coming together in a hairball.
I'm gonna say it's not a complicated hairball because in many ways this followed the script. The YPG, we've been saying for 2 years that they are going to go west of the Euphrates River because they are going to form a contiguous zone. That was always the red line. So the YP, we knew this was going to happen. The US had no option but to tell the Kurds to start behaving. On the other hand, Biden coming in and not mentioning anything about human rights violations post the coup, but coming down very strongly, once again, in favor of Turkey. This also follows a repeated pattern, time and again, of Turkey is a very important ally, and we are not going to say anything about what's happening on the Kurdish issue. And Jarablus, I'm calling Jarablus actually liberating ISIS from the Kurds. It's liberating Jarablus from ISIS, but it's also definitely pushing the Kurds away. And no talk about restarting a peace process. So really, yes, there are complications of.
Okay, but that's in front.
Sounds like a hairball to me.
But that's in front of the cameras. We obviously don't know what happened behind the scenes.
Apparently, I'd be surprised if Biden came out said anything at all about the post-coup crackdown.
Well, he did. He said, look, I'm sorry, I should have come here earlier. He actually apologized collectively for the West, very good of him, for not taking Erdogan's coup seriously enough. You've got some
but
Western journalists calling it the Reichstag fire, and he was saying, this is like, I'm sorry, it's your, 9/11. I thought it was incredible. Coming back, it was the choice. Someone said it for Erdogan. It's fatal. It's Fethullah Gulen, or it's NATO. Which do you choose?
Right.
Do you back up your Turkish ally, or do you refuse to hand over this exiled Muslim leader who's done a coup against my government?
Yeah, but he didn't say
clear.
anything about the 60,000 odd people who have been put.
It was. Well, he didn't say anything in their defence. No, quite the contrary. He said, right, I'm sorry, I should have come to see you earlier.
Patrick Smith, they're mentioning Fethullah Gulen, and that has fraught relations. Many in Turkey accusing the U.S. of being in cahoots with the Pennsylvania-based cleric. This is what Joe Biden had to say. It's not up to us. It's up to the courts whether or not to extradite him back to Turkey.
We are cooperating with Turkish authorities. Our legal experts are working right now with their Turkish counterparts on the production of and the evaluation of material and evidence that needs to be supplied to an American court to meet the requirements under our law and the extradition treaty to extradite Gulen. We have no interest whatsoever in protecting anyone who has done harm to an ally. None. But we need to meet the legal standard requirement under our law.
Christopher Dickey, Joe Biden will never be U.S. president, but this was kind of his big diplomatic moment, wasn't it?
Oh, one of many. He's played a lot of important moments diplomatically. This is a really tough one, though. We don't know what proof is being supplied against Gulen. I have the feeling there isn't really that much.
The State Department said none pertaining to the coup. So
boxes of
This is and this is a power play by Erdogan. As you say, it's either us, it's either NATO or Gulen. Well, I don't think that the Obama administration or Biden is going to be pushed around that way. So I think he's making as many nice noises as he can possibly make without actually giving anything away.
Been a busy Friday for the president, inaugurating a third bridge over the Bosphorus in Istanbul and talking on the telephone with Vladimir Putin. But even though the Turkish and Russian presidents agreed on plans to accelerate aid deliveries to the embattled city of Aleppo, The Economist news magazine is skeptical, borrowing one of Biden's favorite expressions, qualifying any reversal of alliances as malarkey, or as you can see here, al-malarkey. Do you agree with that assessment? That at the end of the day, Joe Biden can afford to play nice because he knows that Erdogan is not going to pivot and leave NATO and join the Russians?
Well, No, he's not going to leave NATO and join the Russians. There are games that might be played. They might, for instance, let the Russians start using Incirlik Air Base. That would be a complicating factor. There are things like that that could happen. But I think that the problem with Turkey is not that it's going to make a huge dramatic gesture like leaving NATO. The problem with Turkey is that essentially its own policies are so complicated, and I would use the word treacherous in some respects vis-a-vis the so-called Islamic State, that you don't want them to go back to a position where they were doing what they were doing before,
Really,
which was essentially providing open access for the Islamic State to export its oil, to import its fighters, to do whatever it
He's now
wanted.
fighting on three fronts. He's fighting the Gulenists, which is this sort of weird cross between Opus Dei, the Scientologists, and the Muslim Brothers. So it's very
It used to be
intangible.
very closely allied with him, by the way.
Definitely. I mean,
Helped
he
him
was
become-
part of it.
helped him become prime minister.
And he's fighting them. He's now fighting ISIS, and ISIS are not going to sit back, and they're going to wreak revenge in the form of pretty nasty bombings and so
And
forth.
that weekend
they-
bombing at a wedding, a reminder that he is fighting ISIS.
Yeah. They admitted straight away it was an ISIS bomb, and then he's fighting the Kurdish militias within Syria, within Turkey. So
But the genius of this man is how he manages to get them all together to work in his favor. And, when I saw Al-Malarkey, I thought this was really fitting because, I was in Gaziantep two months ago. And what's happening there and what we are not paying attention to, because so much is happening, is, they are demographically re-engineering those places. It's getting quite Arab, these places. There are so many Syrian refugees. The Turks and the Arabs have not historically got along, but Erdogan, definitely Syrian Arabs, if they could vote, and they can now vote, support Erdogan. So he's playing a demographic game over there, and everything manages to work in his favor. As I said, he's a good dictator.
I don't know. It doesn't look. I mean, it looks to me like a pretty serious crisis he's facing. Certainly not the time to sort of fall out of bed totally with NATO and the Americans.
Nor with the military, nor with the Turkish military.
Yeah, I mean, if what he says is, I mean, we're up to 80,000 now in this purge. I mean, probably more. I mean, if your military and your intelligence structures are so perforated with this Gulenist movement, this is really not the time to fall out with the people who are giving you regional intelligence and surveillance like the Americans and NATO.
All right. As of next Monday, peace is scheduled to break out in Colombia. After more than a half-century of fighting, the leftist FARC guerrilla signing a deal to end Latin America's longest conflict, paving the way for that agreement to be ratified by referendum at the start of October.
Del cónclave de La Habana.
There is white smoke rising from the conclave in Havana, Dr. Humberto de la Calle.
Doctor Humberto de la Calle. Habemos pacem.
Habemus Pax.
Tenemos paz.
We have peace.
Viva
Long live Colombia.
Viva
Long
la
live
paz.
peace.
Habemus Pax from a Marxist guerrilla there, Patrick Smith.
Comrade.
Is this going to work? And one of the interesting things about this deal is one of the issues that it hinges upon. Colombians hate the FARC for a good many of them, but they also are tired of war and would like to vote for this peace deal. One of the problematic issues, and it's one we've seen at the end of conflicts in Africa, is this issue of amnesty.
Transitional justice, yeah. I mean, I think the theory is, and that's what this referendum is going to hinge on. So they've made the peace deal and they're going to ratify it. Probably there's still going to be a national referendum. And so President Dos Santos is pushing his peace deal. It's the grand moment for his government. And the former president, Uribe, is campaigning against the peace deal. And the thing he's using is, we can't possibly give these FARC guerrillas the sort of concessions and amnesty deals that Santos is offering them. So that's really at the heart of this. Everyone agrees we want to end this war. 220,000 are dead because of it. We've got to turn the page. The question is, what deal do we give to the FARC people? The truth is the FARC guerrillas would never have agreed to this deal without some sort of guarantees of controlled amnesty. So they're getting sort of, I think it's an 8-year police control, and then presumably they walk off and then stand for the parliament. So that's the downside. The upside is that the regions where they they were operating are going to get this big injection of funds from the central government. They're going to deal with a lot of those development issues. So I think it looks to be a great deal. And quite frankly, in a year where everything else is going wrong in every other part of the world, it's sort of refreshing that you can actually end an historic war that's killed so many people and stand a good chance of getting the support of the population to end it, turn a new page.
All right, Patrick Smith mentioning there the disagreement between the current president and his predecessor, former President Alvaro Uribe, using the hashtag Por mi país voto no, for my country vote no, asking, for instance, without the armed forces, who will protect the Araucanians, the indigenous people who are still being blackmailed by the FARC? Christopher Dickey.
Well, I mean, Uribe was a hardline president, and he was not inclined to do this kind of negotiation. I think people want the war to be over, but I don't want to rain on this parade, but I'm not very optimistic at all that this is going to hold up for very long. Maybe a lot of the FARC will turn in their weapons. Maybe a lot of them will give up fighting. But this is a rebel movement that's fueled by cocaine and organized crime. And people aren't just going to give that up. There's too much money. You can say, oh, I want development money for the peasants in the countryside where we've been operating. But these are people who are used to lining their pockets with a hell of a lot of drug money. And that's not going to go away. So just as we saw in other rebel movements, other insurgencies, they tend to fracture when there's a peace deal. And you have these spin-offs that are really completely out of control, that no longer will answer to the leadership, and that will carry out, I'm sure, terrorist activities. So I hate to be pessimistic about this, but history tells us that that's the way this is going to go.
Well, there's also a large component of human nature that goes into this too. People who have had their relatives, their loved ones kidnapped by FARC, some people, even though FARC has claimed it has released all of its captives, there are still people who haven't seen their relatives back. To tell those people, as well-meaning editorialists do, that this is a fine thing and everyone should just live and let live and turn the page and move on, it's very difficult to get people to work against almost muscle memory and say, okay, I forgive. It's fine. That was all in the past. Everything's fine now. I completely agree with Chris. There's the hard part comes now. And there are quite a few areas where it's, I think, probably Pollyanna-ish to expect that the bad will go away, the bad memories and the bad feelings.
And of course, it has to pass through a referendum. And, as we saw in Italy, there's a referendum, and post-Brexit, I think
as we saw
the lesson seems to be, leaders really shouldn't risk their...
I don't know why he actually did that. No one was asking him to. It's almost a sort of Cameron self-immolation
Well, because he feared apparently Parliament's vote
would block it.
Would be a tight one.
Because, it looks like a huge risk, and I think it could all fall down then. So
right.
It's quite an easy case to make. We don't. Well, if we had a referendum on giving amnesty to the IRA in Britain, I don't think they would have got it.
The Olympics in Rio included gestures of great sportsmanship. There was a podium wedding proposal, two runners helping each other in the 5,000, and what the Washington Post described as an incredible act of bravery. Men's marathon silver medalist Feisa Lulesa making a gesture at the finish line last Sunday that puzzled sports commentators. He said it was in solidarity with the Oromo people and the brutal crackdown back home against protests that have seen hundreds killed. Authorities say he's welcome to return. He's staying away, though, and pondering exile. His wife, unsurprised at his gesture.
I was very scared at the time, but I wasn't surprised because I know him. He was burning inside when he saw on social media all those dead bodies, people being beaten up and arrested. So I was not surprised because I know how angry he is.
Can he go back?
If I was his coach, I wouldn't advise him. No. I don't. Ethiopia is in probably the most serious ferment it's been since the EPRDF took over in 1991. That's a historic guerrilla movement that actually united all these groups. They united, they were led by the Tigrayans, who are a minority group in the country, but they united the Oromo and the Amhara against them to oust the dictatorship of Mengistu Haile Mariam. And in his historic victory in 1991, they then tried to stitch the country with this sort of ethnic federalist structure, which was quite revolutionary at the time, where each one of the many, well, the main ethnicities in Ethiopia got their own state. So there is an Oromo state and there's an Amharic state, and then there's a sort of southern community state where the current prime minister comes from the south. What's happened, unfortunately, is that people are disputing these boundaries and disputing the amount of the allocations that they get from the center. So the federalist structure is coming under huge pressure. So it's not just the athletes' home area, but it's the Amhara areas, which are very, very important. And between those two groups, the Amhara and the Oromo, they're more than 50% of Ethiopia's population, which is pushing 100 million. So this is a very significant moment. And there's huge tension. There's no question about it. So the government have got to really work out how they're going to respond to these protests. So far, it's been lethal force, and that obviously isn't going to do the trick.
The gesture on par with the Black Power fists of 1968 in Mexico by the American runners?
For a lot of Ethiopians who are skeptical of the government and support the Oromo and the Amhara opposition, it will be seen that way. It will be seen as a very brave gesture by a dissident.
Leila Jacinto? In terms of the Olympics, because he could face sanctions because you're not supposed to do political gestures.
Right, and the Ethiopian government has reassured him that he could come back home safely, but I seriously doubt he will.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank Patrick Smith and Bagameri, Christopher Dickey, and Leila Jacinto. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
And you've been following this story. It hasn't made much news in this country, has it? The burkini ban, and France's highest administrative court a few hours ago blocking it in at least one town.
Yes, and it does seem like that is all that we've spoken about for so long now here in France, but it really has taken hold as an international issue too. It's provoked fierce debate and very much divided viewpoints based on religion, based on sex, based on all manner of things, really. But the reactions today to the fact that the Conseil d'État has ruled that this ban in Villeneuve-Loubet wasn't legal, and so should be rescinded, has been as mixed as you might expect. We've had lots of tweets like this one, cheers to you fascists, this Twitter user saying, along with a picture of Leonardo DiCaprio raising a glass. And that is a view that's shared by a lot of people online when you look around. However, the other end of the scale is this. Nicolas Dupont-Aignan, a politician who is the president of Debout la République. You may not have heard of it, our international viewers. It's a party that basically means Stand Up the Republic. He's planning to run for presidency in 2017, and what he says is if we accept the burkini today, we'll end up with Sharia law tomorrow. Lots of people responding to that one, including this tweet, which says, if we accept the policies without brains today, oh, well, that's what we have already. So lots of people finding things to joke about, although this is quite a serious issue, and certainly cartoonists around the world really mocking the whole idea of this burkini ban. Lady Liberty featuring in many of them, this from the Times. You've got police ripping the clothes off of this poor woman with François Hollande raising his fist in the background there. Cartoon of the day, Liberty, what liberty? You've got Lady Liberty hitting a Muslim woman in a burkini over the head with the flame there. This one is another take on the Statue of Liberty. Apparently the French police were around, says this Twitter user, which is quite an original take on it, I think. And Matt, another British cartoonist, has the bikini police pointing out that you must remove the socks from under your sandals, really pointing out how ridiculous it is to police people's wear when they're on the beach.
It literally is the fashion police this week.
It absolutely is. Looking elsewhere, I mean, this one from Ertikan, they are asking if the the bikini will be around in the winter. And the woman in the bikini there is saying that, yes, I'm freezing, but I don't want to be reported for wearing an ostentatious outfit. And of course, that word ostentatious is one that's been used many times in reference to the burkini, saying it's an ostentatious religious symbol. So lots of people really ridiculing it. However, there are some who've taken it very, very seriously indeed, including people like this Twitter user describes himself as a nationalist, not a racist. But what he says about today's ruling, thanks to the Conseil d'État for proving the powerlessness of the French Republic to oppose Islamization. And on a similar feeling, again, the idea that Sharia law is going to follow just because the court has ruled that there shouldn't be a ban on burkinis. This Twitter user saying that the next stage is for men and women to be separated on the beach and then Sharia law.
All right, lots of debate. And Anne Baghamari, one of the issues has been people feel as though some people who are not feminists have been defending this on feminist grounds on both sides of the argument.
Okay. I think once you start to get into an area, and these cartoonists have made that very clear, you start to get into an area of personal choice, and you start telling other people what they should do and what they shouldn't do. That's difficult ground to be on. It's not surprising that people would want to stand on higher ground and say it's a more generalized issue. All you can do really is take a look at the protesters who are saying, and they're women and our men saying, you know, get off my backs. Don't tell me what I can do. Don't tell me what to wear. I think you have to take them at their word that they don't want people meddling in their own personal stuff.
It is one of the big questions, which is the greater affront to women's freedom. Is it covering oneself to adhere to religious diktats, or is it being told that you don't have the freedom to cover yourself if you wish to? And lots of people tweeting on that kind of theme. This Twitter user says, a big thank you to those who've liberated women by allowing them to swim hiding their impure bodies. J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter novels, has weighed in on this too. So Nicolas Sarkozy, the former president, has called the burkini a provocation. He's also asking for it to be saying that if he's voted in 2017, he's going to ban it across the country. Absolutely. J.K. Rowling says whether women cover or uncover their bodies, seems we're always asking for it. And the I newspaper also has an interesting article on this one. They've spoken to an Iranian activist who is against the ban on the burkini. The reason she gives for this, Daria Safai is her name. She now lives in Belgium, having fled Iran, has never worn the headscarf since leaving Iran. She says, I don't believe the choice to wear the veil is a free choice. It is indoctrination. She says it's like we put a dog in a collar and they learn to obey us. So very, very strong views against the burkini ban there from Daria Safai.
All right, many thanks for that, Emma James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.